Good afternoon or good morning. It's afternoon in Europe or almost early evening. It is morning here in Seattle, where I happen to be. This is one of my favorite webinars to do every year. This is the one where we talk about the new version. So this year it's going to be about WEBCON BPS 2021. We work hard at WEBCON on our developers do a lot of good work all year round. We could not be more happy about it, but they do minor releases and a few new features over the course of a year. We tend to save up the really dramatic stuff for the beginning of the year. And this is a year where there's definitely some dramatic stuff to show you. We think you're going to like it a lot. All right, we've got a lot to do, and I expect it to pretty much take the hour, but this should be fine. If you have questions, feel free to type them into the chat box. I will see them. I may, if it's right in the middle of a demo, I might not notice them until the demo's over, but I'm doing lots of little demos in between slides here. I think it'll work. But yes, if you have a question, type it into the chat box. I will see it. All right, let's get started. I do need to do a quick warning. In past years, when we have done these webinars, inevitably someone was on the webinar thinking that they would get an overview of what it already looks like before jumping into the new stuff. There's not time for that, and we don't normally do that anyway. We have a couple of great videos on our YouTube channel that walk you through what WEBCON BPS is, and you're always free to reach out to people at WEBCON or people at our partners if you'd like to see more about it. If you want to hang around and watch it, by all means, everybody is welcome. I love everybody, but this is only going to be about the new stuff. I'm kind of assuming you know about what the product looked like last year. And as long as you're okay with making that assumption too, we're all going to have a good time. Let's get started with the most dramatic addition to WEBCON BPS 2021. And that is a brand new thing called Designer Desk. It is a really big deal and it represents a lot of work, and it's a lot different from the approach taken by, well, most of the other guys. Designer Desk is a fast, easy, web-based tool for creating prototypes. Now, these italics that you see here, web-based and prototypes, I did not put them in lightly. They mean something. It is a web-based tool. You don't have to download anything to use it. You use it directly within the WEBCON BPS portal, just like you would design reports and just like you would design start buttons and dashboards. That's the fun part. The second part is, and this is fun too, actually, it's for creating prototypes, not complete applications. It's for designing or beginning the design of an application and creating living requirements that someone can test and see. So it's a prototype. It runs in a very limited fashion, but it's not for build. Okay, how about this? It's not a tool for creating complete applications. This is not a web-based version of Designer Studio. It is very specifically a thing that will make the work that someone does in Designer Studio a lot better. And this is all going to become obvious as soon as I do a demo with it. You can use it to design workflow steps and paths, at least to lay out the steps and draw all the paths and provide some information about them. You can lay out the form and specify the fields for it. You can fill in the field matrix that indicates what should be done with each field as we move through through different workflow steps. You can design reports and start buttons. You already could, but you can do it in the same place. And you can even create some data sources, fixed value data sources. You're not going to be connecting to SQL databases or SAP, AP, web services directly from inside designer desks. But in places where you've got choice fields and so on, you can create a fixed value data source as an example of what you want to see. That's a good way to think about it. And everywhere is a place for you to put in annotated instructions that explain what it is you want the finished application to behave like. We built this for stakeholders, citizens, if you would, to improve requirements, to make better requests of people. We also built it for design professionals to improve their results, because they start with a lot more than some abstract ideas or text written. In fact, here, the stuff you used to be doing with Notepad or Word when gathering requirements, now, or even Visio for that matter, you can now do with Designer Desk and produce significantly better outcomes. Designer Desk, how about this? They start it, you finish it. From the point of view, if you are a Designer Studio user, they start it, you finish it. If you are a citizen or a stakeholder, then you start it, they finish it. Everything depends on the point of view of the beholder, I suppose. There is plenty of room to experiment with and note requirements. You know something, before we go any further, let's just jump in and do a demo. I think that would be completely in order. So here we are looking at the new portal, and we'll come back to talking about the portal in a few moments. I want to focus on Designer Desk. And sure enough, but again, I said you start the whole thing from the portal. So if you click over here, you'll see that there's an option here called Designer Desk. This is the same place where you'd be setting the theme or changing the language or so on. But yeah, let's come down here and look at Designer Desk. And here we are. We're in Designer Desk 2021, and I can see that a while back I created a project of my own, and I've already given it to somebody with Designer Studio, and they're in the middle of building my real application. But I'm going to create a brand new prototype here, and I need to give it a name. So let's give it a name. How about we call it, oh, I don't know. How about Test 2021? It's not very imaginative, but it's a demo, and I'm illustrating a concept. So let's click OK. And now we're in Designer Studio. Now you're kind of looking at something that looks a lot like the system dashboard in a full-blown WEBCON BPS application. That's by design. So you're seeing the application information component. You're seeing a place where start tiles might show up and a place where reports might be displayed. And this is all correct, but you also see these two buttons, design a form and design a workflow. And there are some extra things over here on the side. We'll get to them in a second, but I'm going to choose design a workflow. I like to start with the process and then figure out what the data is that we need to collect for the process. So we'll do the form second. You can start with the form. I'll show you how in a minute, but here, this is the new work. This is the workflow designer for Designer Desk. And I'm going to move a few things around. And let's add maybe 2 steps of approval. Let me move it over here. Let me move this here. And a couple of things. This is not designed to be exactly like Designer Studio. One, it's a web-based design, so a few things are different. And 2, just some of the behavior slightly changed, not the least of which is we'll automatically thread the arrows to avoid things crisscrossing. If and when we can, we'll give up if it becomes too difficult, but we try very hard not to have lines cross steps. And let's do a couple of other things here. If you want to drag and drop, it's pretty straightforward. Just hover and then grab one of the nodes and drag over to another place. That works okay. To move something, you don't select it first. In fact, if you select a path or select a step, it brings out the properties box. No, what you do is you hover over the anchor point, and you'll see that there's already an arrow there. You grab the anchor point, and then you move it. It goes like that. In fact, let's finish this up. There. All right, this is basically a perfect workflow where everything is only ever approved. And of course, we know that never happens. So let's opt for a couple of options here for rejections. And in fact, let's even throw in an outcome that is not a happy one where the designer gives up. Let's move this over here and do that. Okay. There's my layout, and now it's time to start filling in a couple of points. So the step name, I don't want it to be start. I want it to be initial request or preparing request. I personally like to name my steps after what the status would be. Well, in other words, if you're looking at a report and seeing a column with the current step, I would like that to reflect a status. We are sitting in the point where we're waiting for them to prepare a request. And here we're in the middle of the manager review. Notice that I'm clicking apply, very important. And then let's see, how about committee review? Clicking apply, and then here, finished. And over here, we call this withdrawn. All right, what I have not done is named the paths, so let's do that. Now, actually, let's back out of this for a second because I did this so quickly, I want you to see what happens. Here's the name of the step. Here's where you describe what happens during the step. So these will be instructions. This will be part of the documentation for it. You should think that in every moment what you're doing is providing instructions to the person using Designer Studio. You're doing a little bit of the work to get it started, but you're not here to build the entire application. You're here to build the best possible instructions to somebody with Designer Studio. And sometimes that means sketching it out and building something that's alive. So instead of calling this go to the next step, let's call this submit. And what do I want to have happen when this takes place? This should go to my manager. Okay. If I need this to only be available in some cases, this is where I will put in some conditional logic. This will actually turn into a form rule. When you go ahead and export this to Designer Studio. This will be a form rule with essentially a comment inside it that the Designer Studio person can turn into the real thing, but we won't do that here. When you're testing the prototype, this is not the real assignment. This is just the assignment you want to use when you run this through. Should this go right back to the person that starts it, or should it go to whoever the current user is? And I'll say current user. All right, let's click apply. And I'm just going to do this one as well. This is withdraw. So if I want to give up right away, there we go. And this will also go to the current user. All right, not much more to do, just so that you see what's available here. Flow controls here, system things here, actions. Look, you can start hyperlinks, you can validate forms, you can call other workflows. Almost everything is here. There are a couple of things that we removed because they don't make sense here in Designer Desk, but no, it's pretty much everything. All right, when you're ready, you click save. And then we'll come back here and build a form. Now, this is a little bit different from the way it's done in Designer Studio. Here, we're going to have you paint the form at the form layout and the form fields are combined. So there's still separate steps inside of Designer Studio, but here in Designer Desk, we're trying to cut down on the total number of steps. So we still have the zones, top, bottom, left, right, And let's add a couple of fields. How about we do a single line of text? Now, if I hover over this, I will see that I can click here on edit and change a bunch of properties, including the name, but I'm not going to do that this time, just because I just want you to see. You can just highlight the label that comes with the field and change the name on it. So how about we do name? All right, now if I come back here and click on this, you'll see name has changed. So if I want tooltip text and explanations about how the field should behave, put them in here. These will be turned into comment style form rules that can then be turned into real rules. If I need a default value to be chosen automatically, explain how it comes to pass. If I only need it to be visible in some cases, or editable in only some cases, or required in only some cases, throw in that conditional logic, hit apply. If you want to throw in a couple of other things, how about, let's see, why don't we do a choice field? That one's kind of handy. So where it picker, yeah. Instead of one choice field with a setting to do it is drop down or pop up search or autocomplete, we kind of did what we do with item lists and broke them out into 3 fields. Yes, behind the scenes, they're all choices with different behaviors, but here in the designer, we do it assuming it's 3 different field types. So drag it until you see the dark line appear, and then there it is. And if you want to, you open this up, and everything looks the same except for this bit down here where I want the field to allow lookup from this list or source. Now remember, what you're going to do here is an example of what the choice list should look like. Don't worry about connecting it to an existing data source. The only data sources you'll see are going to be part of this prototype, and they're going to be fixed value lookup lists. And if you haven't created it before, you can create it right here. So how about I call this categories, and I create, let's see, one, whoops, let's try and type better. Call this alpha, and 2 beta. All right, and now I choose that and I click apply. One more thing. Again, this is to give you a taste. We're going to do an entire webinar just about Designer Studio probably next month. And right now it's just to give you a feel and to understand the purpose for why we created this. How about, oh yeah, you know what? A WEBCON BPS form wouldn't be complete without standard things like task details and attachments and comments. Let's throw those in here. I just like them. And then what else do I want to put in here? How about an item list? Yeah, let's throw in an item list right here. The way we handle item lists here in the Visual Designer, look, we've already put in 2 columns. These are single line text boxes. You can get rid of them. Just click here and do that. Yep, I do want to delete that sample column. So there's 1 left. And notice these plus signs. These are actually drop targets. So let's drag and drop a floating point number to here. And there it is. And then you can come in here and change whatever you need to do. All right, that's really all there is to it. There's plenty more, but if you get this, you understand how it works. So let's click save. Notice this button up here, finish and publish to Designer Studio, because I now have a configured form and now have a configured workflow. I really could just stop and work directly from here. This wouldn't be the best of results though. We actually want to run this through a quick test, and we will, but there are 2 things missing. Thing number 1 is we haven't done the field matrix. Here it is. We separated it out because some of you like to start with the form first. So you could design the form, then do the workflow, then do the field matrix. I'm going to make name required. There's always a challenge when you're simplifying something as to what to leave out and what to bring in. So we've left out for some of you, at least for the time being. Read-only is just read-only. There's no difference between read-only label and read-only box. It's just going to be a checkbox, not a checkbox or a square. And then what was the other thing I wanted to make sure you saw? Oh, if you right click, you're not going to see anything like copy from one to another. Remember, you're building prototypes. You're probably not going to get that fancy. It's just a trade-off. It's much easier, fewer choices, fewer levels of confusion. We may revisit that at some point in the past or in the future. All right, so I now have a field matrix. Let's save it. Data sources, I already have that one I created. Oh, I know. It's not going to be the easiest thing in the world to start this without any start buttons, or at least a start button on a report. So let's quickly create a report. This is absolutely no different from the report designer in the full BPS portal. Except we already are doing selected and we're already choosing this process. Pick some columns. The only interesting one I really added was name, so we'll drop it in here. And here in view, I'll just add a built-in start button. Okay, save the report. And now I can test it out. Remember, the dashboard is alive. I'm kind of building the application from a dashboard. So here we go. Let's click new and see what happens. Yep, there's my name. Here's my autocomplete choice field. That looks right. There's all the other stuff. And here's my place where I can add some item list items. And I see the right buttons that do the right things. I'm a happy guy. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to publish this to Designer Studio. Let's go. Do I want to remove all the test elements? In other words, if I've thrown some sample data in there, do I want to leave it there for the Designer Studio person to see? Maybe. Yeah, why not? Let's do that. And away it goes. So what I can do now is come here to Designer Studio and open up the list of available applications. And I need to refresh this. And as soon as I do, I will see under Designer Desk Applications, there's my test. And if I open this up, there's my workflow. There's my form. If I open up a form field and I had any custom logic, that will show up as form rules. And that's basically all there is to it. Not bad, eh? And then I carry it forward and work back and forth. Now it's a one-way import. You will not see in Designer Studio the ability to send it back to Designer Desk for testing. No, by the point you're building it in Designer Studio, you can just have someone go to the portal and work on the project. And that, as they say, is that. So let me come back here. Excuse me just one second. And there. Just needed to get ready for the next demo. Okay. Let's get started and move on to the next cool feature. Oh, a couple of quick things on Designer Desk. There's plenty of room here for stakeholders to experiment with and note all their requirements, but there's not so much going on that they go down a side path and do something crazy that professionals have to solve. This is a tool for facilitating communication between stakeholders and design professionals. We think of this as not so much citizen development, but citizen assisted developments. In other words, citizens play a role. They help in the design of the overall thing, but the application is the result of a team effort. The citizens are part of the team. We're not going to make citizens bear the burden by giving them tools and say, go fend for yourself. That's citizen development. With citizen assisted development, it's a team effort. Professionals still bear the burden for the final product, but citizens help play a role in defining it. That's much better than just jotting down requirements and abstractly asking for what they have an idea of what they want. It's a better way to work. Coming soon, by the way, in Designer Desk, we want everyone to be able to use this. So in webconapps.com, you will see a Designer Desk only subscription option. You can go in there and use Designer Desk to build an application prototype. And at that, it's free. It will be free. And then when you click a button, it will design and generate requirement documents that you can then take to someone with Designer Studio or a partner consultant and so on. And if you either upgrade the tenant to the real thing, or you've got another tenant or another subscription for a production version of WEBCON BPS, will be able to furnish the Designer Studio person with a proper BPE export package so they can then carry it forward. All right, so anyone can design applications or at least begin them as prototypes, and it's a pretty sweet deal. All right, let's move on because there's a lot more to this than just Designer Desk. We improved the portal in many ways too. So not the least of which is it's now more easily edited, and like the logo is much easier to change. The background photo is much more easily changed. How about, yeah, here, let's just jump into it. You do these changes through themes. So if I come here to edit themes, you'll see now that there's a place for me to put in a new URL or a URL to the image that's going to go up here. There are some background images that I'm using. These can be either referenced or uploaded. You got options. All right, so that's where you change that. But we're not done. The next thing that you can change, there are compact start buttons that are very easily configured. Let's take a look at those. If I come here to this particular project, you'll see here, new claim. Let's go into edit mode. And if I click here, you'll notice this option, display mode, standard and compact. Let's switch it to compact, and that's what it's going to look like. So I'll click here on save, and now it's a tiny little button. It's still very easily identified, but it's much smaller, and I can now have a lot more of them. So there have been situations where we've had some clients want to have a form that launches other forms. In other words, I have a form for launching a new item, and then when the form opens, I need to choose the item I want to create. It's much easier to just have lots of start buttons on a dashboard for doing that. One of the reasons people resisted that, or have resisted it in the past, has been because the buttons are huge. Well, now the buttons don't have to be huge. Someone is asking, do we have an example of what the requirements document looks like? We'll show you all of that in the Designer Desk webinar that we're doing next month. This is basically to give you an idea of what Designer Desk is and what we meant for it to cover. We will go into all of those details when there's time. Not time for it right now. We've still got a lot more to do. Someone else asked, so once they build the prototype and send it to designer, the developer can build off the prototype, add to, they don't have to start from scratch. Yes, 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 absolutely. That's exactly the plan. Those are great questions. Thank you very much. All right, let's go. You just saw me change the size of a button, so let's keep going because there's more stuff. We have the support for favorites. Favorites are great. Check this out. If I go in here, now I'm looking at one particular application, but let's say I already made it a favorite. Let's pick a different one. How about I go here to dev ticketing? I don't think this is a favorite yet. Okay. And now I'll click, oh, I'm still in edit mode, excuse me. Let's get out of that. Okay. Yep, I want to turn this into a favorite. Let's call this ticketing. Click save. Now check this out. I come back up here to the top level portal, and sure enough, there's ticketing. All right, so frequently used applications, that we're not getting rid of that. That's still there, and that will dynamically be calculated by either the most frequently used applications you have created, have used, or in the absence of any data on you, we will now pull this information from the most frequently used applications by the company, by your organization. So we no longer want blank areas that don't start populating until you start using the product. If we have no data on you, we'll use the data from your organization. And then as we learn about you, this will become personalized. But ultimate fixed level personalization, we got that right here. And then all this stuff is still very much present. So favorites are nice. Other portal improvements. The system dashboard just got a lot better. The system dashboard now has the ability to pin suggested elements, and that defaulting to overall suggested elements for the company as a whole or the organization as a whole. Also, we would like that area to not be empty. And well, here, let's take a quick look. Let's go back here to this solution. So these buttons are always fixed by the designer. You'll always see all the start buttons. But these suggested dashboards and reports, if I always want all cases to be available, just click that. So this will always show up here. Let's see, what are some other things? Again, there will always be a list of elements. If it's not for me, it'll be for everybody, and it'll gradually default to just being the stuff I use the most often. The idea is pretty straightforward. We want you to like system dashboards. That, you know, we're big on consistent user interfaces at WEBCON. The forms certainly are specific to the applications, but you know, if a user learns one form, they kind of understand every form that you might create. We want the same thing to be true of dashboards, but that doesn't work unless system dashboards are really, really useful. So we'd like them to not be empty. We'd like them to be actually used. So the built-in stuff, we want to be really, really handy. If you need custom dashboards to become the new application homepages, look, do that. We added that last year for a reason. We want you to do it when it makes sense, but we kind of want the application to be ready to use the moment you're finished. And a system dashboard that's handy, well, that's nothing but good. So we'd like system dashboards to become more useful. Less of a need to make alternate dashboards in the application pages. You might still make alternate dashboards just because they're really, really useful. Think of it as giving you a choice. You can still do it any way you want. But if you use and lean into system dashboards, it makes adopting future projects easier on users because they already understand what a system dashboard looks like. All right, reports. We made reports a lot nicer. Checking on a couple of questions. Excuse me a second. If I go to a client to gather requirements, can I use this new tool? But how about the license? Client doesn't pay yet because they're not fully convinced. Where can I play in front of the client citizen, the prototype designing? We'll talk about this in detail next month in that webinar, but the quick answer for you is I mentioned that there are free designer desk accounts on webconapps.com that will be available next month. And you can always point to an environment of your own and use Designer Desk off of that. So you can either set something up for them or work off of your own environment, and you can use any web browser in order to build this stuff. You do not need to install the client or anything like that. We want this to be heavily, heavily used. There are some licensing issues if you start using the whole thing in production. We'll get to those too. Like I said, lots and lots of detail on this next month, and lots of detail immediately. If you just contact someone from WEBCON or someone from a WEBCON partner, we can go into all this, just not in this webinar, because now I got to talk about reports. Sorry about that. Okay, let's go on to reports. Reports got better in several ways, not the least of which is conditional column formatting. You get to do colors, inline buttons, Active Directory, photo, all kinds. Here, let's just go look at it. This will be fun. Let's go over here. This is an environment where I've created a bunch of custom dashboards and reports. So let's go here to this one where we're doing a heat map. And oh, we're supposed to be showing the employee photos. I am guessing this is because we're faithfully attempting to show a graphic image. I'm guessing I didn't import them correctly. So chalk this up to user error, not software error. This should be showing photos. I'm guessing I haven't imported the photos from Active Directory. That's my fault. Let's see, here's another example of histogram bar chart type stuff. And to see how you configure this, it's not hard at all. Check this out. You go over to views, and if I want to do total time spent as a heat map or the system step, here, check this out. So width, conditions, and depending on the value of a column and so on, then I'll choose the background and the font to use and so on. That's pretty much how I'm doing the heat map type effect. And then for the business owner, or I want to show the photo, I'm using a little bit of JavaScript to pull that off, or JSON to be exact, sorry. Because I've chosen the coloring mode to be advanced instead of conditions. And I also might have gotten this URL wrong. But again, it's not a software error, it's a me error, for which I apologize. And then if we wanted to do the histogram type thing here, let's go into design mode for that too. Views, and the coloring mode is a data bar. See, if it's a numeric field, then we can do data bar, color scale, or conditions, or advanced. We're trying to be quite clever about this. And like every feature in WEBCON BPS, we will do in a very good faith fashion and attempt to improve it on a continuous basis. All right, let's get back and keep going because there's more to talk about. KPI reports. This is a new type of report we've introduced that does step completion times, does expected versus actual completion times. You can embed this in a dashboard or have it be standalone. Let's take a quick look at one of these that I happen to have handy. There it is. It's a KPI report, and I've pointed to a particular process. And so I'm showing for each step in the process as we move through it, whether we're behind or ahead or something to that effect. And obviously not in Germany, where personally identifiable information isn't even usable in this context, but in other places, being able to check and see whether or not you've got a bottleneck with a person. Maybe we need to show Luke how everything works because it's taking him some time to get it done. Doesn't necessarily mean he's bad, just means he's not working as fast as the others, and I should figure out why. It could be for a problem on my end that's affecting him. I'm not making value judgments here, but anyway, if you want KPIs on the behavior or the performance of an application, you can turn that into a report very, very quickly. KPI report is a type of new report. If you want to add a new, you'll notice the KPI is here now. And all you do is point to the process and decide whether it's for all workflows and steps or selected workflows and steps. Pick the columns you want and their KPI relevant columns. Massage it a little bit with views and you're ready to go. There's less to configure here because what the report is for is pretty straightforward. So if you would like to embed in the dashboard behavior for the overall thing, you should be good to go. This is a really, really nice addition to our mix of features. Oh, row ID column. This is a quick little esoteric thing, but it'll be a godsend to some of you. If you are doing a report and there is an item list. So in other words, you don't want to report on the master information, but rather the detail information. That we've had that for at least a year, but what we've just added is a column for row ID, so you can make a distinction between different line items if you're reporting on item list line items in a report. It used to not be so easy to tell the difference between two rows if their data was otherwise identical. But now that we got a row ID column as well. All right, forms. Forms got better too. Forms got better in lots of very, very nice ways. First of all, there is an absence schedule field type. Let me show you that very, very quickly. I'm not going to dwell on it because we've had this for a couple of months. We actually introduced this, I think, the third quarter of last year. But there is a report type that shows you vacation schedules, and it's also available as a form field that can be embedded in a form. You point it at a source of either planned vacations or scheduled vacations, and it'll even have the ability to point it at leave balances and so on. And it's rather nice. It just works. How to configure it, how to set it up, and how to connect it to the right data sources. There is content on community.webcon.com that explains this. We'll talk about that in a few moments too. Landscape sections. We've had this for about half of the previous year, so I won't really get into it. It's just normally in a form. Let's see, you see label, and then on the left, and then the value on the right. If you specify a section as landscape, we'll put the fields above, or the labels above the field values, up to 3 at a time, side by side. So if you have a section, if you mark it, let me go here. If you have a section and you identify that you want it to be horizontal and it has no more than 3 items underneath it, we'll have it look a lot like the way an item list looks. HTML field type. This is, we actually, I think, introduced this just a month or 2 ago, but technically this came out in the 4th quarter of last year. It's really sweet. The HTML field type will help you out in a couple of really big ways. Let's go over to this form for examples of this. First of all, this is an HTML field, because not everybody likes to see where something is by clicking on the information button and looking at the highlighted step. I know, crazy, right? But no, some people really like this. They're fond of it, and that's fine. We can do it. Let me show you how we do it. Let's go here to Designer Studio. And I see here that there are a number of fields with this little icon. And in some cases, we're doing some tricks with JavaScript and cascading style sheets. You open this up. We go into the designer, and there. This is how we will go ahead. We will bring in information from other places and then display it any way we choose to using JavaScript. And notice you've got access to constants, but you also have access to a ton of JavaScript functions. We'll help you build this. So these are ways to do gets and sets and other manipulations on the form content directly from inside of an HTML block. Plenty of stuff here, including directly invoking menu actions or moving along to next steps or popping up other forms as hyperlinks and so on. It's pretty nice. Those of you that have been clamoring for this, it's a very organized way to embed fancy HTML and JavaScript in an item without doing a lot of crazy work. And by the way, it's a little bit simpler if you want to just throw a button in there and then have the button when clicked call a form rule. That works too. I've seen some people, in fact, I've done it, create this in the past by creating a data row function that just created, used a SQL select statement to bring back HTML. That was crazy. So we added an HTML field type. That's what that's for. Item list grouping. You can now have grouping of items in an item list, and you can change the grouping for each step. Here, quickest thing to do. We don't have a ton of time left, so I'll just show you a picture of it. So we're grouping on person during this step and then showing the item list items there. Other things in forms. Form rules have improved. We now have aggregate operators for the contents of item lists. So if you want to figure out what the sum of the items in an item list is and use that in a form rule, you can. For each row in an item list, yes, you can do something to every item in an item list inside of a form rule. It's very, very handy. There's a set focus operator that should help a lot with keyboard-based operations. And for that matter, a concatenation operator. This is one of my favorites. I lobbied for this personally. This one was all about not having to have a lot of nested plus operators to build strings and such. All right, let's keep going. A split. If you wanted to parse strings, you don't have to drop to SQL on a business rule or JavaScript in a form rule. We now have a split operator and the ability to grab an item out of a split collection. So that's nice. Attachments count, you can also see, well, this is great for making sure that you don't advance or you pop up a warning if there aren't any attachments and you're expecting some. Let's see, what else do we have? Mobile improvements. This got better too. Visual improvements, and it's consistent with the web portal, and we've got barcode scanning now. So take a look at this. This looks a lot more like the standard browser-based portal now. We've made the look and feel very consistent. And the barcode scanning isn't general purpose barcode scanning. Your phone already has that, and we can leverage it, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about if you open up the WEBCON BPS mobile application and scan a WEBCON BPS printed barcode, like on a physical asset or something like that, it will immediately pop up the form related to this barcode so that you can operate on it. So when you want to do digital processes on physical assets from the field, from your phone or from a tablet, we just made that much, much, much easier. This to me is as big a deal as Designer Desk, or maybe only slightly less of a big deal than Designer Desk, but it's big. And diagnostic mode. Diagnostic mode is something users can activate and administrators can examine the results. You don't need to install Fiddler on someone's desktop and look over their shoulder to figure out what's going on anymore if someone's having form performance or form behavior problems. It provides detailed logging. You can filter on it. You can search for it. Best thing for me to do is show it to you in action. So check this out. I've got this form. Any form will do. I'm going to come here and I'm going to choose Enable Diagnostics. Okay, diagnostics are enabled. You see that going on? So now I'm just going to do some things. How about I click here on Edit and I click in a couple of locations. Maybe I want to add an item or delete that item. And maybe I want to click on a button where I approve this. Okay, so I am done. And something's taking long or something is wrong and so on. And now I've got this stuff. I can see here all of the individual form actions. I can see anywhere an error might have popped up. I can do any of a number of things. I can reset this and cancel it, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to finish and save it. And a URL to this report just got copied to the clipboard. So now I can email this to somebody who can do something about it. Here. There. I just sent off a report, a desperate cry for help. And then when I receive email describing that desperate cry for help, here, let's help this along a little bit, shall we? I think I just emailed it myself. Yep, there it is. Now, if I click on this, there's that report. I can pick this apart and do this. Now, someone is asking me, is it possible to do this on local infrastructure, not just on Azure? The answer is absolutely. This is something we built into WEBCON BPS. Works everywhere. We don't like to create features that only work in one location. We like most of our features, whenever possible, to work everywhere, and this is no exception. So yeah, think about it. Oh, you also don't need to correlate this information with, if this were Fiddler, you would be trying to correlate what was happening in HTML and JavaScript to what's actually going on in your application. Here, everything is already tightly coupled. It's really, really nice. Let's see. Impact on this for you. The logs contain warnings. The logs contain error messages. The logs contain form rendering information, default value settings, business rule executions, form rule executions, elapsed time, everything. You can have a lot of fun with this. All right, let's move on. Miscellaneous, just because each of these is just one slide each. I grouped them together as miscellaneous. Business rules got better. The same aggregate things that are available in a form rule for item lists, they are available in business rules too. The concat operation is there, the split operator, the get at index operator, which works nicely with split. So I can split a string with one function and then get at index to get one of the elements in the split. Attachments count is there. Getting attachments and being able to manipulate their metadata or get at their metadata, absolutely available now, and it's pretty nice. Yes, you no longer need to do database queries to check to see if the sum of all the items in an item list exceeds a certain level. You've always been able to get this, but you always had to go to SQL to do it. We're trying gradually to make that less and less necessary, but at least in the wonderful world of WEBCON land, getting to SQL is not a painful thing. But still, the easier we can make this, the better we can make this. This is a big deal from an infrastructure point of view. Some of you are not going to care about this at all. For some of you, this is a lifesaver. OPENID authentication. We have had for a while a BPS authentication service that had specific support for Google IDs and Microsoft personal IDs and LinkedIn IDs, but that was using something proprietary and tightly coupled to each of those three services. We're now adding this support so that you don't need the BPS auth component. You can talk directly to Google's OpenID provider and LinkedIn's OpenID provider and Microsoft's OpenID provider and everyone else's OpenID provider. It's a standard. And as long as it's an OpenID, we can authenticate an account using it. We can have different OpenID rules or authentication rules for BPS Portal and for Designer Studio. It basically might even allow you, if you're only using one authentication system, to skip the extra logon window too and just go straight to the login. Now, I will mention this is for specifically authentication. It is not for directory synchronization or identity management. If you aren't using Windows Active Directory or Azure Active Directory or ADFS, you're still going to need your own method for creating and manipulating the users and the groups and manager information, photos, and so on. There isn't a standard for synchronizing directories. If there are enough requests for this in user voice, yes, we have user voice support now. More on that in a minute. We can look at whether a generic LDAP extractor is warranted, but right now it is a non-trivial amount of work, and there are other things people seem to want more. But I will say this is going to help a lot. Talk to us if you want to try and tackle the identity management stuff too, but you'll still need to create the users, or the BPS users. This will just help immensely with authenticating them. Okay, let's keep going. Designer Studio got better. You no longer need to have Designer Studio make a SQL Server connection. It will connect to the BPS portal using web services and run everything through there. The asterisk, I'll explain in just a second. You can launch Designer Studio from BPS portal, and it just immediately pops up. It's installable even from the BPS portal, so you don't need to go to another place to get it. That caveat is if you're still using a SharePoint integrated installation, you know, the one where you're using classic SharePoint web parts for all of the UI stuff, that will still make a database connection. But if you're using modern web parts and a deployment of WEBCON BPS that doesn't depend on SharePoint, but can still talk to it, of course, that no longer needs a SQL Server connection at all. A very quick picture as to what's going on. How about this? Let's go into here. I'm looking at an application, and if I launch Designer Studio right here, right now, it will open Designer Studio and load this application. And if I didn't have Designer Studio already running, I could click here to download the Designer Studio installer. It's pretty nice. Simplifies matters quite a bit, and it'll auto update once installed. The REST API got better. We now have an authentication flow based on OPENID. The work we did there, we reused here. We've already had authentication flow based on a couple of specific things, like, for example, Azure AD and Salesforce, and about 3 or 4, maybe 6 other specific ID providers. But now we've got one based on OPENID, so you don't have to have one action to get the tokens and then store them in technical fields and then reuse them in subsequent requests. We now handle this. We can handle different responses depending on the results, at the very least, success and failure. We now have also support in REST for a multi-part file upload, and we can consume OpenAPI information for configuring requests. OpenAPI, some of you know it by its original name, which is Swagger. Yeah, we have support for that. All right, let's move on. Data sources improved in a big way too. Check this out. You can now associate data sources with specific applications and choice fields, and when people are making use of it, they only see their associated data sources. You can test the data source during selection. You can even create new fixed values lists on the fly inside of Designer Studio as you're configuring a choice field. A very quick picture of that. Really? Oh, just screen blanked. Okay. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I am inside of an application, and here is a choice field. So I'll go here to this choice field, and I'll click here on the available data sources. And I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 dictionaries, and that's it. I'm not seeing a bunch of other stuff. Trust me, if I come over here to the list of data sources, I've got lots of connections. I've got lots of data sources. But you know what? In most cases, I have not made that data source available to other places. What I do have here is this new tab called Association and Security, and it shows me all of my applications group by group. and I can indicate whether or not it should be available. So I made this particular data source available to these two applications. You can visualize this information inside data sources. You can visualize this information at the application level and see which data sources are available to you. And from the point of view of somebody using Designer Studio in light mode, where it's only focused on an application at a time, they're only going to see the data sources they're entitled to use. But at least they'll see them now for the first time. And that's pretty nice. All right. Localization got better in some ways. British English. We've had one English language pack and it defaulted to using American style terms or layout for dates and so on, date formats. We now have a British English pack and it uses European date formats. All of this can be expanded. We haven't made differences in spelling based on British versus American English yet, but I will always impress upon you the utility of coming here to bpstranslator.webcon.com, which is where you can build language packs. Now, you can start with one that already exists and expand it, and then provide more and more information. And this is a community setting for creating support for multiple languages. We have support for several languages that we provide ourselves, but the community can cover just about any language. In fact, I'm going to start a project in a little while where we do one for Canadian English, because Canadians, I'm Canadian, we spell mostly, but not always like the Brits do. We pronounce things like most of the time the way the Americans do, but our date format is year first, then month, then day, kind of the exact opposite of the common usage in year, month, day, as opposed to day, month, year. And of course, the Americans have their own system, and that's kind of wacky anyway. But anyway, the point is, if you've got English, you can choose the type of English. Right now, the main difference between them is the date format, but that can evolve into something a lot more. And yeah, I just mentioned that already. Import, export, we're just about done. This now has been expanded because you've been able to export and then import dictionaries, lookup values and such, and template libraries for things like document generation. But you were only able to export and import the structure of those things. Well, we've just supported the ability to bring along the contents, because often the lookup values and the document template libraries for document generation are part of your application, and they should be deployed with it too. So now dictionary content and library content can come along for the ride when you publish an application to a target. User group definitions, at least BPS user group definitions, those will come along too. We're also better at handling large packages, like packages that wind up being more than 250 megabytes. We handle that better now. And we do a lot more logging. And there's even a GitHub tool that we've done for bulk data loading. We are doing a lot more in terms of creating useful tools and uploading them to GitHub and giving you the source and a downloadable executable. So this gets you out of having to create a second process to and then running on a timer job, something to go from one to the other. It just helps a lot with bulk data loading. It might warrant a webinar of its own. It'll certainly warrant the knowledge base article that'll appear on community.webcon.com if we haven't done one already. Performance has improved. We now do better timeout handling and timer handling, so we can more quickly execute actions and start paths and such. The Solar search index happens a lot faster too. It's also more configurable. You can tell it which fields you want to omit from the index and whether you would prefer to omit attachments as well. Although by default, we'll still index everything. Unless you really want to do that, just continue to use it. It just works. The API, oh, someone has asked a question, excuse me. Do form fields in the layout and backend database support Asian character letters? They're Unicode, they should work. But I suspect you've tried that already and there might be nuance involved. So if you want to get in touch with me, mikefitz@webcon.com. I would be happy to discuss this further with you, but other than that, I would leave it at that for the time being. Ask me more if the question is more nuanced than that. But yeah, we support Unicode, so it should allow just about everything. You can update connection data programmatically now. And the scenario I think of with this is your WEBCON Designer Studio person has the ability to build an application, but they shouldn't know the connection details to get to, say, SAP or a special database or something like that. Someone else curates that. And they don't want to tell those credentials to the WEBCON BPS designer or even the WEBCON BPS admin, but you can have them run a script that calls our API to update them. So as you know, if you're changing the passwords on a timer for service accounts, you can run a script and then WEBCON BPS will know about those changes, but we won't know what they are. We'll just benefit from them. You can manage BPS user groups from the API. You can add and remove and change attributes of attachments now. It's nice. And I was talking about putting some stuff on GitHub. One of the things we've done with this, and this also relates to the API, is we have extended the API to support digital signatures, which means we now have source and binaries on GitHub for doing digital signatures on items. And we've already given you support for DocuSign, for Adobe Sign, for Scribble, and for Authenticatio. And more can be created using the APIs we used for these. The source code is readily available. So yeah, now there are actions for saying, go get this thing DocuSigned. Just about finished. This is the last big thing. On webconapps.com, we now have a guided place to download Designer Studio, and it will auto update once downloaded. You'll be able to launch Designer Studio directly from the BPS portal as well. And OCR functionality is now available to all of the software as a service plans, essentially making the SaaS offering equal in functionality to self-hosted or on-premises. And the free Designer Desk only licensing is coming very, very soon. If you go to webconapps.com today, you're still going to see the 2020 version for another week, maybe two. It's because we're modifying the end user license agreement for that. And until the lawyers are finished with it, we can't update the version that's there. So 2021 is freely downloadable off of community.webcon.com. It will be the version on webconapps.com in a matter of days or a very short single-digit number of weeks. With that, what can I tell you? The way to do things better has become better still. It's what we like to call the WebCon way. Thank you very much for sticking with us. I see that I ran over by 10 minutes. You've been very kind to hang around. If you've got more questions, type them into the chat box. I'd be happy to deal with them and stay around until you're done with them. But by and large, thank you very, very much for attending. By all means, download this and get a look at it. Oh, I mentioned Community Portal, by the way. Check this out. Community.webcon.com. If you haven't been here yet, go. Register, log in. You know what we've got in here? We've got discussion forums. We monitor these, we react to these, and so do other people. We've got a knowledge base. We're gradually transferring everything from howto.webcon.com over here, and all the new stuff is being created here. There's a platform center for getting new downloads and infrastructure guides and so on. There are downloadable templates that can be used. And we also have user voice so that you can request features and other, you can vote for them and so on and so forth. We'll use this as one of the inputs in making decisions and setting our agenda. So yeah, everything in one place. It's another big thing. It's not a change to the product, but it's a change to the company. So please come here and use that. Thank you very much. I don't see any new questions, so I'm going to call it finished. Have a great rest of your day. Bye now.